Good afternoon, and welcome to the Forum Club of the Palm Beaches. I am John Bowers, and I have the sincere pleasure of serving as this year's Forum Club Board President. We are excited to welcome former President and CEO of Boeing Commercial Airplanes and the Ford Motor Company, Alan Mulally, as our speaker. We would also like to thank Eric Lindner for joining us as the moderator for today's program. If Dr. Robert Norris will please come forward to give the invocation and to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand if you are able.
Will you pray with me? Awakened once again on Sunday morning, marred by a nightmarish tragedy, then by a second mass murder on Monday, followed by this morning's unsettling news of yesterday's unwelcome violence at our own community's South Florida fair. Media leads with the raised concerns for human safety in public places, of polarizing public rancor and rampant racism, cowardly anti-Semitism, war, and the economic destabilization of just 24 days into a new year. Dear God, it's only noon on Tuesday, and we have more than enough over which to say grace. So without the know-how and ability to do more or stem the unsettling rising tide, we do what we can and what we should. We remember and we pray for those experiencing life's strangulating grip in their dark days of personal loss, of life's disruption and human hostility. And we mourn the loss of life and livelihoods and commerce and communities, viable prospects of national and international communication and cooperation that might foster global peace. Yet, Lord, we also have abundantly more than we deserve and enough to be grateful for. Living in this community in homes that most cannot afford, with sustaining employ, surrounded by colleagues, good friends, and plentiful food on our plates before us. May we neither take for granted the bounty we enjoy, nor what our response to such measures of grace should be. And so where we are found today for someone's better tomorrow, may we be instruments of another's peace, illustrations of human mercies, incarnations of godly graces, and vehicles of human love. As modeling ambassadors of hope in this land, hear our ardent prayers, dear Lord, and make us the answers to them. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Dr. Norris. A few housekeeping items. Should you wish to post about today's event on social media, please use the hashtags and handles found on the screen and on the placards located on your tables. The photos from today's events will be posted on our Facebook page soon, so make sure to follow us. A special thank you to Carrie Bradburn with Cape Heart Photography for photographing our program. We'd also like to thank Akbar Watson and Pyramid Books for their partnership on today's event. Copies of 2 books that reference Alan's leadership, American Icon, Alan Mulally and the Fight to Save Ford Motor Company, and The Extraordinary Power of Leader Humility, Thriving Organizations and Great Results, are available for purchase in the lobby. We invite you to join Mr. Mulally in the lobby following today's programs, where he will meet with guests and sign copies of the books. We are also accepting questions for the audience Q&A. If you have something you would like to ask Mr. Mulally, please write it on the index cards found at your table and raise your hand at the air. One of our volunteers will bring it to the head table. You can submit questions throughout the program, and we'll try to get through as many as possible. This week, you will receive an invitation to renew your Forum Club membership dues for the 2023-2024 season. Memberships can be renewed online or via check. Please make sure to renew your memberships by Tuesday, February 28th, to ensure that you can take advantage of all of our upcoming events. With that said, we're excited to share some information about our next few programs. On Friday, February 3rd, the Forum Club will host former U.S. Secretary of Transportation and U.S. Secretary of Labor Elaine Chao. Tickets for this event are now on sale and can be reserved on the Forum Club's website. Next, as some of you may have heard, the Miami Marlins made history a few months ago as the first major sports franchise to have women operating in the entirety of the team's day-to-day business. I feel like I should have a glass with a spoon up here. I don't know if it's just overly loud at the podium or if that's being experienced throughout the room. But if you could please give a moment. Yes, thank you, my proxies, for tapping on your glasses. We don't have to be super quiet, but just a little bit. So, as some of you may have heard, the Miami Marlins made history a few months ago as the first major sports franchise to have women operating in the entirety of team day-to-day business. Coinciding with Women's History Month, we are excited to welcome the Miami Marlins President of Operations, Caroline O'Connor, and General Manager Kim Inge to the Forum Club on Friday, March 3rd. And finally, on Tuesday, March 28th, the Forum Club will present former U.S. Attorney General William Barr. All three of these events will be held right here at the Kravis Center for the Performing Arts. Next, we'd like to take a moment to recognize the elected officials and the candidates who are in the audience. We ask that everyone please hold their applause until all the names are announced of both the candidates and both the elected officials and candidates, so we may recognize them as a group. The elected officials in the audience are Susie Diaz, council member of the City of Green Acres; Dorothy Jacks, Palm Beach County property appraiser; Charlotte Leonard, councilwoman for the City of Westlake; Keith James, mayor of West Palm Beach; Rochelle Litt, vice mayor of the City of Palm Beach Gardens. And we have no candidates, so please give a round for all the elected officials. Thank you for your public service. We would also like to recognize board member Richard Rampell, Andrew George with the Honda Classic, and the trustees of the J.M. Rubin Foundation for sponsoring the students in attendance today, as well as for helping support the online digital databases that allow Palm Beach County teachers to access our programs at no charge in their classrooms. Thank you. In addition, we'd like to thank our President's Gold Circle sponsors, Sarah Alsafram with GL Homes, Don Kieslewski with Florida Power and Light, Barbara Sufflis Noble with the J.M. Rubin Foundation, Michelle McGovern with Baptist Health South Florida, and Caroline Villanueva with Florida Crystals. Their generous support we're almost there. Their generous support enables us to host these lunches, and we're incredibly thankful for their continued involvement in and dedication to the Forum Club. Now we'll give them their applause. Thank you. Finally, we'd like to acknowledge a special thank you to Harry Rhodes with the Washington Speakers Bureau. Harry has been an incredible advocate to the Forum Club over the years, facilitating our invitation of numerous speakers, including Mr. Mulally, and we're extremely thankful for his collaboration on today's event. Thank you, Harry. I couldn't get him to quiet down, but I bet you guys will be able to. So it's time for me to turn the program over to Alan Mulally and to Eric Lindner. Alan and Eric, if you'll please join me on stage. Alan's subject for us today is his working together leadership and management systems to create value for all stakeholders and the greater good. We will use a moderated interview format with Eric Lindner leading the initial discussion, and then I will follow with audience questions. As their bios were shared with everyone prior to today's program, I won't restate them in full, but I did want to touch on a few highlights. Alan Mulally is the former president and CEO of Boeing Commercial Airplanes and the Ford Motor Company, who led Boeing to be the global leader in commercial airplanes and Ford to be the #1 automotive brand in the United States. Throughout his career, Alan has been recognized for his contributions, industry leadership, and service, including being named #3 on Fortune's World's Greatest Leaders, one of the 30 World's Best CEOs by Barron's Magazine, and one of the world's most influential people by Time Magazine. Eric Lindner launched The Engine Under the Hood, The Power of Principled Leadership, on Substack last month, The series examines the consistently and conscientiously applied principles that drive some of the world's greatest leaders, starting with Alan Mulally. With 25 years' experience in business, Eric is the author of several books. He's also a professor at Georgetown University, teaching ethics in action since 2015. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, Alan Mulally and Eric Lindner.
Thank you very much, John, for your warm welcome. And I am so honored to be here and pleased to join in our interview with Alan Mulally. I have been following Alan's career of leadership service at Boeing and Ford for many years. Last month, our editorial team launched The Engine Under the Hood, The Power of Principled Leadership on Substack. And this series of articles examines the consistently and conscientiously applied principles that drive some of the world's greatest leaders, starting with Alan. So here we go. Alan, you are known for your family, Boeing, Ford, and community service. Please share with us your leadership formation, development, and service.
Well, thank you, Eric. Makes my eyes water. Wish my mom was here. So I'm really pleased to be here. I love the Forum Club and what you stand for and your compelling vision of continuing education of all. So it's really neat to be here and be here with Eric. So I'll be glad. Why don't I just start when I was born? Okay, so I grew up in Lawrence, Kansas, and we didn't have very many resources, but we had a mother and a father that just absolutely loved us. And I really think I started to be brainwashed when I was very young, because every morning I'd be getting ready to go to school and I'd get ready to walk out, and my mom and my dad would say things to me just to remind me what the important things are in life. And the first one they'd always say is, "So Alan, remember what the purpose of life is." And of course I had memorized all of these things, and I said, "You bet, I remember, and that's to love and be loved." And then my mom would say, "But remember, honey, in that order." "Thanks, Mom." And then the next day my dad would say, "To serve is to live." "Thanks, Dad, that makes a lot of sense." And the next day they would say, "It's nice to be important, but it's more important to be nice." And then it goes on and on like this. And if you learn to work together with others, you're going to be able to make a big difference to a lot of people around our world. Another one that served me really well is expect the unexpected and expect to deal with it in a positive way. "Thanks, Mom." And so the one that really got me was that respect everyone. They're all creatures of God, and they're worthy of your respect and your love. So that's where I started out. But I was just a normal kid, and all I wanted was a pair of Levi's and some Weegian shoes and to fit in. And so I realized that that serve is to live was going to be my answer. And maybe I could get a car someday. Maybe I could go to the University of Kansas, which is in Lawrence, and which is my window to the world. And so I started my TV guide route, a paper route, lawn mowing business. I worked at the Dillon's grocery store as a bagger and then a checker. Worked for a construction company, worked on a farm, worked on a ranch, and then all the way through college, I helped my engineering professors with their work. And so I loved it, and I loved the appreciation that my customers shared, and also their suggestions for improvement, but also including all of the stakeholders in whatever operation I was in. And so that had a huge impact on me because I love serving, and then I had a chance to join Boeing, and I had a chance to serve on the design team of every Boeing airplane. And I love to say this slowly: the 707, the 727, the 737, the 747, and on the 757 and the 767, I had a major role in the cockpit design and the autopilot and the auto throttle and the flight management system. And then Boeing asked me to serve as the chief engineer and then the director of engineering and the program manager for the 777 airplane that you all know well. And then when I was a CEO, we launched the 787. And if you look at all the seats that are flying in the world today, 70% of them are in Boeing airplanes. So clearly, if it's not a Boeing, we shouldn't be going. I didn't come up with that. I learned that somewhere else. And so I love Boeing. I never thought I would leave Boeing. And then I got a call from Bill Ford. And Elena Ford is here. Elena, can you stand up? This is Elena. I was so glad to see her today. And so I was very interested, and I knew I was kind of in trouble from the start because I wanted to know everything that Bill wanted to share with me. And he's such a great leader. He's very honest. He's very transparent and forthcoming, and shared everything about the situation at Ford in 2006. And so at the end of the day, everybody always asks me, why would you leave Boeing? And I never thought I would. And at the end of the day, I really felt like I was being asked to serve a second American and global icon. And as we all know, Boeing and Ford is the arsenal of democracy. It's the reason that we are free getting through World War II. So I joined Ford and never had so much fun. Tremendous teams, a lot of talent. We really focused Ford, as you know, on the Ford brand and on the quality and the productivity and the fuel efficiency and the affordability. And we got a lot of Ford dealers here too, which is really fun. They're fabulous representing Ford, and they're a great source of knowledge and a big part of the turnaround of Ford. So that was my formation, and the combination, I think, of those principles and practices, the way you said the question, plus the program and project management expertise I learned at Boeing, and then had a chance to serve at Ford, were the main parts of my formation.
Well, you are also known, thank you for the formation, you are also known, and increasingly so, for your working together principles, practices, and culture of love by design. Could you please share these with us?
Well, you bet. And I made up a couple of slides for you. And Sarah is going to send these to you after the meeting. And she really encouraged me to share this with you. And I'm a designer, so I designed my own slides. So I'll start with this first one. And so this is our culture of love by design. And as you think about this, everything on here is demonstrating your love for all the participants, for all the stakeholders, because this is what you would do. This is the way you behave if you believe in people. So these are the operating processes, but also the expected behaviors of all the participants, including all the stakeholders. So the first one is people first, love them up. And when we're making an airplane, I'll just use the 777 as an example. We have nearly 600,000 people that are working on the design of the airplane around the world in the manufacturing plant. And they're talented, they're committing their life to it, and so it's just really important to appreciate them on who they are and what they do. So love them up. Everyone's included. We include all the stakeholders because we're doing this to create value for all the stakeholders and the greater good. It's really important to have a compelling vision and a comprehensive strategy for achieving it and a relentless implementation plan. And of course, at Boeing and Ford, it's all about safe and efficient transportation, getting people together safely around the world. And then the strategy it's really important to have all the elements. So the product strategy, the processes which you're going to use, everything about the people and the working together, and a plan to profitably grow the business for the good of everybody. Clear performance goals, one plan. Most companies have a lot of plans, and everybody's wondering what the plan is, as we all know. And also using facts and data. And the facts and data are really important because we care what people think, but we really want to know what the data is they're looking at. So when we do have an issue, then we can move forward with confidence because we know the facts and data that they were considering. Expect the unexpected and expect to deal with it. Thank you, Mom and Dad. And in this rapidly changing world, this is absolutely the answer to everything, is to expect the unexpected and expect to deal with it in a positive way. And so when we actually run our business plan reviews, we actually, every week, every member of the team is there representing every discipline, and they start with a one-page that summarizes what's going on in the world in their area of responsibility. So we were never, ever really surprised. And so we're dealing with the things that need to be dealt with in a positive way. Everyone knows the plan, the status, and the areas need special attention. This is really interesting because, as we know, most of the cultures that we are in, we don't know everything that's going on. And so we actually color code the issues. Each leader presents each week a couple of charts that shares everything about their strategy and their plan to contribute to our overall plan. And they actually color code their own charts on how it's going. So for every item, they'll have either a green or a yellow or a red on the chart. And the green means they're on plan. The yellow means they have an issue, but they have a solution. And if it's a red, they have a new issue, and they don't have a solution yet. And we don't think of these as a problem. We think of these as gems. And that's why the culture of love is so important, because we need to know everything that's going on, including the yellows and the reds, so that we all can work together to turn the reds to yellows to greens. Then propose a plan, positive, find a way attitude. You know, very sophisticated words, as you can see. And you look at all the rest of those words: respect each other, listen to each other, help each other, appreciate each other. You notice it doesn't have a lot of beliefs and values and very sophisticated words, because what we care about is what we can see and the way we act. And what we found is that if this is the expected behaviors and you operate this way, it's amazing how your fundamental values and your beliefs will move in a very positive way because of the success you have with these behaviors. Emotional resilience, trust the process of working together. Whenever we have an issue, we go right back up to the top. We go right straight down. Do we have everybody included? Do we know what the issues are? And do we have all the right people to work on them? Now, the last one, have fun, enjoy the journey and each other. Every morning and every night, I say thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I've never had so much fun at Boeing and at Ford and serving. And to work with all these talented people. It's just been fantastic. Now, there's one corollary to this, and that is never a joke at anybody else's expense, ever. And the reason is it's never funny. And people will go along to get along, but what happens to them from a working together point of view is they're going to be very careful to share a situation or an issue or a problem if they're thought they're going to be made fun of. And so the most important thing, never a joke. And anybody says that there's enough fun things to laugh and enjoy besides each other's expense. Now, the other part about this is that we hold ourselves, starting with me and myself and the entire leadership team, accountable for following these behaviors. And we always have this written down at Ford. We had this neat little card, and the Ford team actually organized the principles and practice under FORD. And so everybody knows the plan. Everybody's helping each other follow the plan. And anytime that they need special attention, we act on it accordingly. And I'm sure one question I get a lot: what do you do about the people that don't follow these plans? We have an answer for that too. Now, the bottom of the page you see PGA. Now, that doesn't stand for Professional Golf Association. That stands for Profitable Growth for All. And I've always used profits as the simplest way on the financials to get everybody's attention, because profits equals revenue times margin. So you only can increase the revenue by making products and services that people want and value, and you increase the productivity, the margins, simultaneously. And so as you grow the business, then you're going to have profitable growth, you're going to be able to do more of what you love, and all of the stakeholders are going to benefit. And if you're not growing, you're dying, and you can't make it okay for the stakeholders. So profitable growth for all. And of course, the bottom is we're creating value for all the stakeholders and the greater good. I know you've seen this airplane, and I just want to share with you how that came about. So I was in Guangzhou, China, and we were working on a deal with China Southern Airlines for $20 billion worth of 777 airplanes. And I was the engineer at the time, or the design engineer, and so I presented what I'd always do is I'd present the status of the airplane and how it was going, and then I'd sit down and I'd draw my airplane, then I'd write the equations of motion around it just to entertain myself. And so I finished my presentation, I sat down, drew the airplane, and the chairman of China Southern Airlines was on the other side of the table, and he stopped the meeting, and he said, "Mr. Mulally, that's your sign, that's your beam, that's your chop, that's who you are." I said, "Well, sir, it's true. I live to help make the best airplanes in the world and support you." I said, "What do you think?" He said, "Well, what I think is this decision is the biggest decision that I'm ever going to make. So I'd like you to sign that $20 billion contract with that airplane." So I turned around to the contracts and the lawyer people, and I said, what do you guys think? And they said, "Mr. Mulally, you cannot sign a $20 billion contract with a doodle of an airplane." So I turned around to the chairman again, and I said, "So what do you think?" And "I'm only going to sign it if you draw that airplane." So I turned around to the lawyers and the contracts people again, and I said, "So what do you think now?" And he said, "You know, Mr. Mulally, I really like your airplane." And so ever since then, everything I sign, I always sign it with the airplane. And the kids called me the other day, and they saw one on eBay, a golf ball with that airplane on it that I had signed for $169. So I just wish I would have saved some more of those. So anyway, Eric, those are the principles and practices that created this culture. And the way that everybody feels about it is a culture of love by design. We designed the culture just like we're designing the airplane or the car, and we're holding ourselves and everybody accountable for following the processes and the expected behaviors of how we treat each other.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. Thank you for that. And you are also known for the working together.
Oh, 1 second.
Please.
Oh, so sorry. 1 second. Okay, next chart, please. Next slide. Oh, I forgot to show you the airplane. So here's the 777. And there are 120,000 people there. And they're all holding their kids up so their children can touch the part of the airplane that they helped design.
Oh.
And this is the rollout of the airplane. And this is, I'm not saying this because everybody says it. This is the finest airplane in the world. And it flies halfway around the world, flies at the highest altitude. We made the wings softer so it's the smoothest ride. We actually added water humidity in the cabin, and we lowered the pressure altitude so you have more air. And so this is the first airplane where you feel a lot better than when you have some air and some oxygen and some water in the airplane. Fantastic performance, twin-engine airplane, halfway around the world. And the whole compelling vision was to use the technology to take people where they wanted to go, point to point, and nonstop. So you don't have to go through the hubs and change flights and stuff. Now, it's a little bit hard to read, but if you look underneath the window, the cockpit, you see you'll see a writing there, and that says "working together." And on every airplane, for first flight, whether it's a military airplane or a commercial airplane, you don't know the airplane works until it works. So you have to actually take off. And so the only people you have on the airplane for the first flight are the pilots, and 2 pilots on a commercial airplane. And so we had their names on the airplane, and the 2 pilots came to see me before the first flight, 2 days before the first flight, and they said, "We would like to remove our our names, and we'd like you to put working together, because it's the working together that's created this. And we, the pilots, have been included like never before. It's going to be the best airplane ever, so we would like to have working together on the airplane. I'll go to the next slide, please. So here are the two pilots, John and Kenny. Now you can see the working together a little bit clearer now. And if you also then look down the side of the airplane, you can see the logos for each of the launch airlines. And that this is another unique thing about including all the stakeholders, because we include all the airlines in the design. So even though they're big competitors with each other, they make an agreement that they're going to work together to share all their knowledge of operating their airplanes with us, so we can make the best airplane in the world. So those are the launch customers. Okay.
Perfect. Perfect. And a perfect segue to the question of how you're working together, leadership and management system, to implement your deliver value and profitable growth to all the stakeholders and the greater good. Could you share, please, your leadership and management system, your working together leadership?
Great question. And I have a drawing for you. So next slide, please. So here it is. And your question is very sophisticated. It's very important. And this is a system because it's a system. It has elements that all work together simultaneously. Right. And so these are the 5 elements of working together. And we just spent that first chart on the principles and practices. That explains the principles and practices and the culture. And then the next one is the governance. And that's how we manage all the stakeholders, starting with the shareholders and the other stakeholders, how we do our meetings, how we create value, how we do our business plan review, and how we keep everybody informed. The leadership team is really important. And this is a news flash that you're not going to have this kind of a culture unless the leader starts this way and all the leadership team agrees to work this way. Because our number one job is to lead with humility, love, and service, and appreciate all the participants and hold all of ourselves accountable for following these principles and practices. And then the creating value roadmap we talked about, for every airplane, there's a different compelling vision for it: short range, long range, point to point, nonstop. And so what's the value creating roadmap for growing the business, including the product, the operating process, the people working together, and the results. Then the business plan review is one of the real keys too, because every week we would manage a business plan review where we have all the leadership team from around the world would be all networked in on the internet, and we would go through the entire vision, strategy, and plan, and every one of the leaders, usually 12 to 15, I would have everybody on the team, so everybody was represented: engineering, manufacturing, procurement, communications, legal. And every member would go through their plan on the vision, their strategy, the plan to support the overall plan, and also the status, the reds, the yellows, and greens. And then based on what came out of that, we'd have a special attention meeting to work on the ones that they needed help with on the reds and the yellows. And so my job was to facilitate those meetings. And probably the most important contribution I made was just keeping it on schedule. So you're probably wondering why they pay me for this. So, but the reason is that the most important thing is to create this environment where people are working together and it's safe and we're moving forward together. So that's our management system. And when we send you, when Sarah sends you this material, we also are going to include a slide that has a set of references that are fantastic at describing this management system, so you can see all the detail. And it's really fun to learn about it, and it's really fun to do it. So I wish you the absolute best on implementing your version of working together.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So I think that John is going to lead us and all the participants for any questions that they'd like to ask.
I'll split.
Yeah, that's fine.
Thank you both so much.
Thank you, John.
You can stay there.
Pardon?
You can remain.
Where would you like
Yeah,
me?
you can
Where would you
remain.
like me?
You can sit down there or here. Thank
Thanks,
you
Eric.
so much.
Thank you, Eric.
Okay, a final reminder to our audience. If you have any questions you'd like to ask, please raise your hand, fill them out in the comment card, and put your hands in the air so our volunteers can bring them over to the head table. So our first questions always, we have a practice here where they always come from the student sections. They can often be the hardest questions too, so prepare yourself. Our first two questions will come from the students in the audience. The first student from Pahokee High School, could you please stand, introduce yourself, and ask your question to Mr. Mulally? Thank you.
Hello. My name is Candace DeLeonardo from.
Mike, just a little closer, yeah. Don't be scared.
My name is Candace DeLeonardo from Pahokee Middle High School, and my question is, what do you see as the future of commercial aircraft as we move toward more clean energy travel?
Did you hear
Very
the question?
good. And it was nice to meet you earlier. I met her when she arrived. I think we'll continue to see continuous improvement in the airplanes we have today, both in all the different technologies, but also in the fuel systems themselves. And every new airplane, and even on existing airplanes, we are continually improving their efficiency and using less resources. There are a number of enabling technologies like electrification and hydrogen that are also possibilities. It's going to be a little bit longer on that because of the infrastructure, and also on some of them, like hydrogen, the packaging of that in an airplane is a real issue. And on electrification, same thing with automobiles. We've got to keep making progress on the electrified components, especially the batteries, because we need a significant improvement in the batteries to make them viable. But even the more important thing about both airplanes and cars and electricity is we need to generate our electricity clean. Because right now, every time we use a kilowatt hour, we're actually making the world worse because we're generating the electrification with coal-fired plants. So we'll continue to improve forever.
Thank you. And the second student from Dreyfus School of the Arts, will you please stand and introduce yourself and ask your question to Mr. Mulally?
Hi, my name is Dua Ali from Dreyfus School of the Arts, and my question is, how have electric car makers disrupted the traditional car market, and do you think they will prevail in countries with poor infrastructure?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the last.
The last part of the question, could you repeat that again? The infrastructure?
Where is she?
Hi.
She's,
Oh, okay. There you go.
So about electric cars in the traditional market, and do you think they will prevail in countries with poor infrastructure?
Well, really good question, and it also applies to the U.S. and Europe, around the world too, because the infrastructure, as you know, is really, really important for electrification. I think that they absolutely will prevail, and I was very honored, and it was very fun to make the first hybrid electric vehicles at Ford, which were great. They still are great. And I think that one of the things at the time was the increase in the awareness of all the leaders around the world that we needed to start moving in this direction in a very thoughtful and careful way. And the biggest issue, in addition to the vehicles, is the infrastructure for being able to charge them. And so in the United States and Europe, we both have accelerated that infrastructure development. But your point is absolutely right. And then when you go looking around the rest of the world, that infrastructure is going to take even more development. So I think that we're going to see more and more collaboration around the world to help, not only on the vehicles themselves, but also on the infrastructure, because it's absolutely the key to going forward from a sustainability point of view.
Thank you. So one of the first audience questions is, prior to joining Ford, there's a story where you were quoted as saying your Lexus LS 430 was the finest car in the world. Now having led the #1 automotive brand, has your opinion changed? And can you give us some more detail?
I have to, Elena knows this really well. And so I accepted Bill's offer, and they flew me to Detroit, and I got off the plane, and they picked me up in a Land Rover. And I'm thinking, I just left Boeing to go to Ford, and they're picking me up on a Land Rover. I wonder what they're working on here. And I like Land Rovers too. That's fine. So they drove me over to the world headquarters, and it's a 12-story building, and it's got this beautiful blue oval on the outside. And I'm in awe. And then we start to go down underneath the building, the doors open up, and we drive in, and it's a little bit dark, and I'm looking around, and I don't see one Ford vehicle. There's an Aston Martin, Jaguars, Land Rover, Volvos, and no Fords. So I'm going, whoa, I wonder what they're working on here. And so they take me upstairs to the auditorium where we do our earnings calls and all of our employee meetings around the world. And Bill walks me out on the stage, and it's full of these journalists, and they have all these journalists online around the world, because I didn't know it at the time, but I was the first leader hired from outside the automobile industry to be a leader of one of the major companies. And they all wanted to know who this person was. So he walks me out on the stage, and he introduces me, and then he goes and sits down. So all of a sudden, I'm having an impromptu press conference, and I just got there. And so they start out, and they're very, very careful and very, very respectful, but they kept asking me questions. And one of the questions they asked me, they said, so what kind of car do you drive? And I said, I drive a Lexus, and I loved it. And so they said, so why do you drive a Lexus? And I said, well, it's the finest car in the world. And then they said, so what does that mean to us? I mean, you're joining Ford, and that's the finest car in the world. And I said, the reason I'm joining Ford is we're going to make the best cars in the world. Got it. Wrote down. 3-inch headlines in the Detroit News the next day. I think we got the right guy. Can I tell you one more story that goes with that?
Yeah.
It's just so fun. So, and Elena knows this one too. So they said, they got really they were getting familiar with me. So they said, so, Ms. Mulally, you don't know anything about the automobile business. And it's very, very sophisticated. The products are very complicated and sophisticated, and the industry is sophisticated, and you don't know anything about it. So I said, well, being a customer in person, do you have a question? And they said, well, yes. What does it mean to us that you're here and you don't know anything about the automobile business? And I said, well, I sure agree with you. It is very sophisticated, and starting with the products. I mean, an average car or truck has around 10,000 parts. And you think about the quality, the fuel efficiency, and the safety, and the systems engineering, reliability, maintainability. Very sophisticated products. I might point out that the 777 has 4 million parts, and it stays in the air.
So given all your successful leadership, we have a couple of questions that I'm going to try to wrap together a little bit. In terms of your challenges that you had overcome when you were at the companies, because the industries that you were in, both of them had oftentimes were tenured industries that led themselves to change reluctance. And so the question is, in terms of, when you think about an airline and trying to assemble those, it takes a long time to change any process in the assembly line. Can you tell us about how you try to still remain to be innovative and keep people working together in those industries?
Oh, you bet. That's a great question. And it goes back to our PGA again. If our strategy is to create value for all the stakeholders and grow the business, and you are going to commit yourself to that, that is the source of all creation, from the product point of view, the production point of view, because every year when you update your plan, and at least you go 5 years out, because if you discount that back, that's 80% of the value, and you're creating value every year, increasing that value. And so you're working on the revenue side, so that's all the features of the product and services that people want and they value, and also on the productivity side. And most companies don't work on those simultaneously, and when you do, you get unbelievable results because a lot of your cost structure is associated with the product. So when you're working on the product, in addition to the productivity, you're going to increase the profitability for everybody, for all the benefits. And so the other thing too is about my parents about expect the unexpected, expect to deal with it. When you're looking at the world, every week, every member of your team is sharing from their point of view, engineering, manufacturing, procurement, HR, what's going on in the world. And so everybody is looking at what the opportunities are to incorporate what that change is as opposed to being afraid of it. So you're welcoming the change both on the quality of the product as well as on the productivity. And so that change is your friend. You love the change because it's going to be part of your answer to grow the business for everybody.
Thank you. And so we had a couple of questions about how did it feel after you had left Boeing and had your successful run at Ford when, I think it was after your retirement at Ford already by the time that the 737 issues had happened at Boeing. And how did it feel as being somebody that led the business before in terms of the company and its strategy, that something like that had happened, that scandal, and how the company was addressing it?
I'm watching it from the outside like you are too, because I'd been gone for a number of years, 10, 12 years, or even more than that. It was really sad. We have dedicated our life, and Boeing is known for safe and efficient transportation, as you all know. And it was just devastating to watch what happened. I think from what I know, reading about it, and all the analysis, I think what everybody knows now is pretty much what happened, that they had some issues and also some design issues on the airplane, and that they didn't find during the test programs and stuff. So I know now, if I'm just watching them, that they've made tremendous effort to fix those problems, and I don't think there could be a safer airplane than the 37s now. And so it was really sad. I'm glad that they worked on it in a decisive way. But our whole life has been, over the years, safe and efficient transportation.
Thank you. And how do you feel about the regulators in terms of that supervise both at the FAA and then the FH, the federal? I can't remember what the safety. Is it the FH? You know I'm sure you'll remember the acronym. I can't remember. Federal Highway Safety Commission. There you go.
Well, the regulatory, I've always, again, back to including all the stakeholders, I've always included the governments around the world in everything that we've done, and it's always been successful because we both have the same goals, and that's safe and efficient transportation. And so I have a lot of respect for all of the agencies, and I also was always encouraging the agencies to work together around the world so that we could come together and not have different requirements around the world. And they've made a lot of progress on that also. So again, this including all the stakeholders to me is absolutely the answer for growing any kind of business, because you need everybody on the plan.
And then so GM's been saying that they'll be totally electric for their fleet by 2035. Where's Ford on the journey? And obviously Tesla being an early starter with some of its battery manufacturing components as well. Where does it leave some of the other automakers in terms of their goals for?
I feel like I should have Elena up here. So again, I'm watching news just like you are, which I love, and I think that the progress that the industry's making is quite incredible. they're all moving in a very positive direction and making a lot of progress. And so I think electrification is going to be part of all of our future, and I think you're going to see the continued progress. When you mentioned Tesla, I think you can see how Tesla understands that they have a lot of competitors now. And so I think they did a good job in what they did, but I think that we're going to see more and more competition and great products.
How was it getting buy-in from, because there's union labor that's heavily used in auto manufacturing? How was and airplanes actually too? How was that process in terms of implementing your management strategy to make sure that the unions were all engaged and supportive of
Great question. So when I was at Boeing, most of the employees were represented by the IAM, and then at Ford it was the UAW. And again, I always included them as a member of the team. And again, because they're a very important stakeholder. And we shared everything with them, our competitiveness, our cost structure, the quality, everything. And then what the plans were going forward to get their thoughts and their input. And so we always had a great working relationship. We took the actions that were required to make us competitive, because when I first arrived, we were not competitive with Toyota, since you brought that up, or anybody else, and to make vehicles in the United States competitively. And we worked together, and we actually matched them in competitiveness. And so I'll always appreciate the UAW and the leadership of the UAW to work together for the good of where we were all going, and that was to make the best cars and trucks in the world.
And you talk a lot about stakeholders, which I think there's been some evolution recently in the way that CEOs talk about interested parties, but it used to always be talks about shareholders. And so it seems like you were an early adopter of this idea of stakeholder. Were you able to get Wall Street or the shareholders comfortable with this idea of taking a broader picture, in terms of looking at who's invested in the company?
Yeah, great question. And you're right, because I was on the U.S. Business Roundtable for many years, and that was a very important conversation that we had for many years. And we really decided that the way to grow and grow for the long term was to have everybody included, because everybody is going to be participating. And I think that the more you include all the stakeholders and you get their inputs and their participation, then the more successful you're going to be profitably growing the business. And if you're profitably growing, then all the stakeholders are going to benefit. And if you're not, they're not going to benefit. So I think that stakeholder-centered capitalism is absolutely the future. And it has different phases through it. When you're not going to have a business if you don't have a customer. So they're a really important part of the stakeholders. And you're not going to have investors unless they believe you're going to create value for all the stakeholders. So, and the employees, you got to love them up. I think that it's a natural thing, and it's very, very effective at profitably growing a business.
And you were considered a Secretary of State candidate for the Trump administration. That job eventually went to ExxonMobil CEO Rex Tillerson. Would your working together system work in the world of partisan politics?
I was just reflecting on that part of my life. Well, I think working together can work everywhere. And I don't care what the organization is, whether it's profit or nonprofit, whether it's small, medium, or large. When you come together, when you get talented people to come together around a compelling vision, and then a strategy for achieving it, and then you relentlessly assess how that's going on the plan, and with red, yellows, and greens, and we can't have a more compelling vision than the Constitution of the United States of America. It's compelling, and democracy. So I just think that we're going to get going again.
Amen.
Because creating value for all of us, is very exciting.
That's great. So we also have, I don't know if you know, but Palm Beach County is the largest agricultural producing county on the Atlantic coast. So about 45 minutes west of you here, we've got big vehicles like combines and harvesters running. And was there ever any collaboration in your prior leadership between any of the large equipment manufacturers in terms of, or have you kept up to speed with any of them, like Deere and Case, in terms of were there collaborative opportunities for them with the automakers because you're all working on engine drives?
Well, I think all of us do the same thing. I mean, we study the enabling technology across all the vehicles, and we continue to learn from each other, and everybody's coming at it from a slightly point of view based on what the vehicles are doing. But we've learned a lot from all the different vehicles around the world. The collaboration is really in the value chain of the people that are supplying the parts, because the OEMs at this level can be 30% of the value, but 70% is with all of the suppliers. That's why you want to have all your suppliers as your partners too, and I always have them represented on the team so that we get not only their parts and services, but we also get their ideas about growing the business together.
So regarding your working together strategy too, you had obviously implemented a really effective strategy at Ford during your 8 years there, and then afterwards, there's many reasons why you can have issues with leadership, but there was a couple leadership changes after that at Ford. And so how do you feel that what's the most important part of the plan to be able to keep it successful from one executive to the next?
I think it's back to the working together system, because the process is the most important part, that you have a process, but then you also have a leader and a leadership team that holds themselves accountable for following the process. And when I shared with you that we have zero tolerance for violating the process or the behaviors, so every once in a while in my career, I would have somebody that was violating the behaviors. And so I remember, I'll just give you one example. So we're having a business plan review one time, and one of the leaders started going after the other leader very aggressively. And they're both really smart, intelligent people. But started kind of yelling at him too, almost like going to be a fist fight. And so I followed him up to his office after the meeting, and I pulled out the card, working together with all the behaviors, and I said, "So how do you think that went today?" And they said, I know I wasn't following our behaviors. And I said, "Well, what do you think?" And he said, "Well, I've been very successful, and you promoted me, and I don't know whether I can do these behaviors." And I said, "Well, you understand and you believe why we're doing it, right? We need the hearts and the minds of everybody, and they need to be respected and included." And they said, "I know, but," he said, "I know, but I don't know whether I can do it." And I said, "It's okay." And he looked at me and he said, "It's okay?" And what he was saying was, "You mean I'm so important that it's okay that I can abuse people?" And I said, No, that's not quite what I mean by it's okay. I'm saying it's okay because you're making a decision to move on. And it's okay. Remember the first principle? I still love you. You're a human being. But this is not going to work for us. And so I want you to go home. I want you to think about it. I want you to talk to the people you love and they love you. And then come back tomorrow and tell me what you're going to do, because I don't want to guess. And then the first thing I want you to do is I want you to apologize to the person that you just yelled at in our next team meeting in front of the whole team, and tell them that you're not going to act this way anymore. And if you want a coach, I'll get you a coach. And also, the rest of the team is going to help you, because we actually use stakeholder-centered coaching which is Marshall Goldsmith's and Francois Hesselbein's process, where we're going to use all the people around us to identify, each of us will identify, including me, 2 things that we're going to work on to make us a better leader. We're going to share it with the entire team, and then all of us are going to help each other move forward together. And so he came back the next day and said, I don't think I can do it. I said, well, you know, we love you and we wish you the best. Stayed in contact with him. He even said to me later on that he wished he would have tried. And then another person had the same conversation with, and she came back the next day and she said, you know, I know where I learned those behaviors from, and it's not me. She used to ask rhetorical questions. Well, in a working together environment, you don't ask rhetorical questions. You're asking rhetorical questions so that you can then share with them that you know more than they know, or what? I mean, so she came back the next day and she said, okay, that's not me. I learned that. I really want to do this. And she went to the next business plan review meeting. She shared with the team that she's not going to do that anymore. And she asked them for their help. And she became one of the best leaders I've ever worked with. So this holding ourselves accountable is really, really important, but do it in a positive, neat way. Love them up.
So that deserves applause. So with your, there's some questions here on work-life balance, which is obviously a good question considering all the busyness that you have. But I think this last question will allow you to get to the heart of that. It's rumored that you have also applied your working together philosophy with your family. Can you give us an example of how this works in practice? And I say that selfishly as a father of 4.
So my son was with me until last night, and he just went back up to New York. It always gets him when I'm asked this, because I have a thought about this to share with you. So Nikki and I have been married for 53 years, and we have 5 children. I know. And so being an engineer and project management and program management, so when we started having children, and we wanted to have the 5, and so when the first one started to get the kindergarten and stuff, and then we started, I was just thinking, you know, we need a business plan review every week. I mean, we have 7 people in our family, and we need a compelling vision, a comprehensive strategy, and a relentless implementation plan to review how it's going. And so I said to Nikki, why don't we start a business plan review? And she said, Alan, this is not Ford or Boeing, or not Boeing at the time. This is our family. Okay, so I don't want to do that. So I thought about it. So I came back the next week and I said, okay, Nikki, how about we have a family meeting every week? Well, what are we going to do in the family meeting? Well, the first thing I'd have on our agenda is that we would come home from church, Sunday morning, we'll do it after church. We'll come back, and then we'll all go through the house and pick up all of our stuff. Because when you have 7 people living in a house, as you know, I mean, it looks like a bomb went off after a week. And so we'll go around, starting with us, we'll go around and pick up all our stuff, take it back to our room or back to our cubicle. And then the second agenda item is we'll all go back to our room, we'll get our laundry, and we'll bring it down to the laundry room. And with 5 kids, we always had 2 washers and 2 dryers, so we weren't doing that all week long. So then we'd wash all the clothes, then we'd bring all the clothes down and dump them out on the kitchen table, and then all 7 of us would sort the socks and all the rest of the stuff. I didn't sign up as a compelling vision to sort socks. And so we finished all that. Didn't take 5 minutes, because when you got all the people sorting your stuff, it gets done really fast. Take it back to the room. Then they bring their calendar down, and we sit around the kitchen table, and they go through. They started this in kindergarten. They go through their calendar of what they're going to do next week. And so then we identify whether they need taxi cab service or cheerleading service or whatever their activities were. And then we'd all sign up for things to help each other. I'd go back to Boeing, to my assistant, and give her my list of things I committed to. She'd build it on she'd build it in my schedule. And so I'd be gone for an hour. I mean, I'd leave in the middle of the day because I just have one integrated life. That's my schedule. And then people knew where I was. They knew I'd be back. And we'd all do the same thing and help each other. And then the next part was we would go through the vision of our family and what our purpose was. And you can imagine the things that I've learned from my parents, where most of them were on there. And we do that. And then another item was that we implemented as they started to get older was that if you're going to do something that's going to be a very positive influence on our family, or it's going to be a negative thing that you're going to do that we're all going to be embarrassed about or feel bad for you or ourselves, you need to tell us ahead of time. Now, that didn't stop all the things that they did, but they sure thought about it. And so, and one of the first things was we go through the behaviors of how we're going to treat each other. Now, you can you imagine this? I'll never forget these, and whenever we get together, they all talk about this together. So one of the girls had an activity. She was a dancer, and she had an activity, and she had signed up one of the boys, older boys, to pick her up from school and drive her to her dance class. As a matter of fact, I think it might have been a performance, and he forgot. And so in this meeting, you go through how the week went. Can you imagine what it was like to have your sister look at you in front of the rest of your family and say, and as Chris was the driver, said, Chris, I just want you to know that you forgot to pick me up, and I missed my dance recital or whatever that was. And she says, just like that. I mean, because she's not yelling and screaming at him. Just our rule is you share how you feel in a positive way. And boy, he just sat there, and I don't think he ever missed another pickup. Well, you can see that it's that working together. So every time we get together, and we get together twice a year with all the kids and all the grandkids now, somewhere around the world, and now that they're old enough where they can have a drink, they have a drink or two, and they start talking about these family meetings. They have all these stories to share with each other, and so a couple times they say a couple things that sound like maybe they didn't enjoy the family meeting. And so one time I said, so if you guys didn't really like the family meeting and you think they're really worthwhile, why did you attend every week? And one of the kids said, Dad, do you remember what the last agenda item was on our family meeting? I said, no, I don't. He said, you passed out the allowances. So I just want you to know that every one of them has their version of a family meeting now, and they love it. So that's true. You asked whether that was true. That is true. That was my version of the business plan review for our family.
That's great. Okay, so we had one last question that got slipped in by apparently a plant in the audience here. It says, tell the story about the book written about you and your wife telling you to go to bed. Do you know what that means?
Oh. I do. Well, it could be a lot of things, but I bet it's about, it says book?
It says, you know how it ends. Tell the story about the book written about you and your wife telling you to go to bed. You know how it ends.
Right.
You know that one?
Yeah, the book's the key. So when I was serving at Ford, Bryce Hoffman, who at the time, he was at the Detroit News, wasn't he? He was at the Detroit News, and phenomenal coverage of the automobile industry and Ford. He just loved the working together. So he decided to write a book. So he actually stopped working and focus full-time on the book. And we, at the time, we decided that we wanted to share this with people so they could benefit from this turnaround, not only the turnaround of Ford, but we were now profitably growing. And as you mentioned, we had become the #1 brand in the United States. And so we gave him access to Bill Ford and the board of directors, myself, all of our employees. And I've never seen anybody do such a fantastic job as he did about covering and that's the American Icon book that you mentioned earlier that I think the bookstore is going to have some copies out here for you. And so we didn't have any editorial rights, and we were not making money on it, and we were doing this to share it with people. And so he wrote it, and he sent me a copy of it a month or so before it was going to be released. So I'm in Dearborn, and he sends me the copy, and I start reading it. And I'm not like a late night person, and so I couldn't put it down. It was like reading The Godfather. I just, like you just every page you're going, whoa, whoa, whoa. I was watching my whole life flash before my eyes because he's covering me at Boeing, he covers me leaving Boeing and going to Ford and all the fantastic fun we had at Ford. And so my wife comes over to me, and I think it was like 11:05, if I remembered exactly right, and I'm never up that late. And she comes over and she said, Alan, it's getting late. What are you reading? I said, I'm reading this book about Ford and the transformation of Ford. I just can't put it down. And she said, honey, it's late. You know how it turned out? Go to bed.
That's a great
That,
close.
whoever
That's
asked
good.
the question,
That's
I hope
good.
this is the right. Hope
That-
that's the question.
I think
you're
that was
thinking
the right answer. All right. Well, thank you for joining us. We look forward to seeing everybody at our next event featuring Secretary Elaine Chao on February 3rd. If everyone will please make their way to the lobby, we can begin the book signing with Mr. Mulally shortly. Thank you.
Okay.
Sorry. One close.
Okay, I would just like to say thank you. Your organization is phenomenal, and you have a great president, and you have a fantastic CEO. And if you can show the last slide.
Oh, the last slide.
The last slide. And here. Okay, now, this is Sarah's daughters, Paige and Maggie. And right now, I'm helping her husband get a new Ford vehicle. And you notice that they bought a Bronco for the girls. So I just wanted to say, where's Sarah? Okay, so Sarah, I have never, I work closely with Harry and the Washington Speakers Bureau, and Sarah is one of the finest leaders that I've worked with, and your organization. So thank you.
That was well deserved. Thank you, Alan. And thank you, everyone, for joining us. We'll look forward to
Great.
seeing you in the lobby.
Thank you.